Hello, and we've got a really exciting one for you tonight, folks. Chris Muscato and Guido. Chris is an award-winning writer on the solarpunk genre, and Guido is part of something called Solarpunk Nomadz, and they are going to tell us about hopefully a bit more optimistic futures with some climate solutions if we all get together and start really seriously taking the challenges that we are facing and actually start cooperating across all borders. And even mentioned about decentralized forms of governments and other interesting things. So what is solarpunk? What is solarpunk nomadism? And how do we get from here to there and these better futures? Chris and Guido, thank you so much for coming. Over to you guys. Yeah, I'll take it away. Over.
All right. Very nice to get a chance to talk with all of you. Thank you so much to the Climate Emergency Center network for having us. I'm very excited to be a part of this. I apologize. I caught a little bit of a head cold this week, so I will be unfortunately coughing through the presentation, but I've got my trusty tea here, so we're gonna get through this. Like Phoenix said, my name is Chris. I am a fiction writer. I write in the solarpunk genre, and with a specific focus towards nomadism in solarpunk. And then later you'll be hearing from my good friend Guido, who is working to put some of these ideas into practice. So I have a bit of a slide share thing here. Let me see if I can set this up, and then we will get going.
I think it's really good that people learn more about solarpunk because, definitely in the networking, there's a few people they haven't heard of it yet. And our mission as networkers is to get these positive possible futures out there.
Right. And can you roughly see my screen
Yep,
here?
we can see that and the
Okay.
smaller. That's it. Brilliant. Perfect.
Very
Oh,
cool.
I love it. Floating. Nice.
All right. So this presentation, what we're going to be talking about for the first part of this is my take on solarpunk, which is something I'm calling nomad punk. And we're going to be talking about this. Do want to just mention the illustration very quickly. This is a illustration that went with one of my stories. Actually, the story that got me working with XR, with Extinction Rebellion, the Wordsmith program. They hosted a solarpunk contest, and the winners got to have their artworks illustrated. This by the great Dustin Jacobus. You'll see more of his work throughout here. All right, so just to dive right into it, we're talking about nomad punk. What is nomad punk? In the simplest term, it is solarpunk nomadism. Solarpunk with a specific focus on mobility, and specifically human mobility, as a part of our climate solutions. So it's a very, very specific focus within the greater solarpunk movement. Why am I doing this? Why am I talking about this? Why am I, me and Guido, talking about this? To get into that, I'm actually going to very quickly go through a very brief history of solarpunk as a literary genre. I'm actually a historian by trade, so for me to understand anything, I need to have the historical context. And for this, this is going to be a very, very brief overview, but I think it'll help illustrate where solarpunk is as a literary genre and where it needs to go as a genre, as well as a lifestyle and activist platform. So, excuse me, to understand solarpunk, we need to start first with cyberpunk and steampunk. These are terms that I'm sure quite a few of you are familiar with. Back in the 80s and 90s, cyberpunk stories began to focus these sort of techno-dystopian futures, cities filled with neon lights. I have an image down there on the screen of those sorts of things, and became very, very popular as a genre. Worth noting that a few of these stories started to focus on ecological collapse as the reason for the apocalypse. These were dystopias because the climate had collapsed, and it got writers in these speculative fields talking about climate as a part of what our futures could be. In the early parts of the new millennium, the steampunk grew on top of that, which is focusing more on alternate histories based on pre-petroleum technology. So you've got this kind of speculative landscape in literature where people are starting to imagine, what could the future be based on the problems we see now? How could it have gone differently? If we just generally feel like we're not satisfied or we're not content with the way things are going, we have concerns, how else could we go through this? It was around this time that particularly Brazilian eco-fiction writers and some artists on Tumblr started to ask the question of, what if the future was better and not necessarily worse. So the very, very basic backdrop to that. And then that brings us up to an important article called From Steampunk to Solarpunk, published in 2008 on the website The Republic of Bees. In this article, the author, who was anonymous when he wrote it, or when they wrote it, said that for a while now, I've had the thought of an economy based on renewable energy, might return to using sailing ships as working cargo ships, drawing very much from this steampunk idea of conflating old technologies and new technologies. They started to look at some of the eco-fiction that was happening and consider, well, what if we could do things like, save on fuel by returning to wind energy? How could we start to do these things? And in this, very notably in this essay, he suggests, I'm going to suggest a new literary genre, solarpunk. And this is our first recorded use of the word solarpunk as a literary term. It starts in this 2008 article and then grows very, very, very quickly from there. About 2 years later, the Tumblr blog, The Land of Masks and Jewels, is the first one to really attach the Art Nouveau aesthetic to solarpunk, and also begins to really put a lot more of that utopian perspective into it as well. So not just looking at the potential to transport things more efficiently or more ecologically responsibly, but also what is a better world look like where these things are happening, place where we are valuing artisans and craftspeople, where we are teaching children about gardening and other food supply skills and things like that. And then in 2014, excuse me, Adam Flynn, sorry, I'm just gonna move my screen a little bit here. Adam Flynn published in Hieroglyph, excuse me, Solarpunk Notes Towards a Manifesto, in which he said that our futurism is not nihilistic like cyberpunk. It avoids steampunk's potentially quasi-reactionary tendencies. It's about ingenuity, generativity, independence, community. There's an oppositional quality to solarpunk, but it's an opposition that begins with infrastructure as a form of resistance. And I think that is one of the most important sentiments that has ever been used to describe solarpunk right there, is infrastructure as a form of resistance. And by that point, by 2014, the concept of solarpunk was really pretty well defined. We had the basic ideas laid out, basic foundations laid out. We were getting aesthetics, we're getting ideas. All these things were coming together, and solarpunk was starting to really mean something in the way people were using it artistically and politically as well. All right, so that's just a very, very basic backdrop on the history of solarpunk, kind of how the genre emerged, how it grew. There's a lot more that goes into that, but for the sake of this presentation, that's kind of what we need to know. As we came to define solarpunk as a literary and artistic genre, we also get a chance to understand where the limitations of the genre are. This is a genre that has a lot of imagining possibility, a lot of scope for incredible things that people are considering, but there are some limitations to it. And I'm going to toss up on the screen here just a couple different images of pretty recognizable solarpunk cities. This is another one by Dustin Jacobus, the same one who illustrated my story in that first screen. We see here some people walking through a park that is just chock full of biodiversity, different pollinators and birds and things like that. City towers with green roofs, systems of transportation, things like that. About as solarpunk as you could get. There's another one. I believe the artist's name is Helia Jam. Excuse me. Different environment, but showing how solarpunk can work in different systems along what looks like a river oasis in an arid region. See a geodesic kind of greenhouse dome, also some return to traditional architectural structures and building materials. Very beautiful solarpunk city there, or feature there. And lastly, one of the perhaps most famous works of solarpunk art out there from Rita Fay. This was the cover of the Multi-Species City anthology. And this is about as solarpunk as it gets for art. This is one of the most recognized images out there. All right, all these are beautiful images. They present a wonderful, joyous future, one that connects the city, the stories of people who are living in these sustainable, just societies. But what we see in there is that there is a limitation. Much of our solar punk imaginings up until this point have very much focused on better versions of the type of societies that already exist. We tend to look at solarpunk and very much see cities. Building out of steampunk, building out of cyberpunk, and this focus on the urban environment, a lot of our solarpunk built that into it as well. And even when solarpunk has expanded to include rural areas, to include different habitats and ecosystems, and there is something of a decentralized quality to solarpunk, which is very, very nice, right? Everyone's response to the climate crisis is going to be a little bit different. This attachment has been basically unchanged. All right, when we think of our solarpunk cities or even our rural solarpunk areas, we think of areas that are green and sustainable. They are just, they are equitable, they are focused on anti-corporations, all this great stuff, but they are also overwhelmingly sedentary. We don't often enough, I think, ask the question of solarpunk, do we need to fundamentally reconsider the questions of how we organize human societies? And that brings us to nomadism. Excuse me. So, nomadism offers a very unique perspective within our conversations about climate change. When we're talking about climate change, two of the words that we hear bandied about very, very frequently are resilience and adaptability. Resilience, of course, being the ability to prepare for a diverse range of effects from climate change. This is something we hear all the time in urban planning and in talking about how our cities are prepared for the future. How are we going to be able to weather the climate crisis? Resilience is a very, very important part of these conversations, but it's not something that we, again, often approach from the concept of nomadism. Whereas we can build our cities to be more resilient to heat waves and storms and food shortages and things like that, nomadism offers us a very different sort of option, which is just getting out of the way of those things. Understanding that the Caribbean is not a good time to live in August and September or October, and maybe it's an option for people there to move out of the way, or Southern Italy could be less and less hospitable as summer heat waves and humidity make it very difficult to live there. And so this does give us a different form of resilience, which is something obviously worth considering amidst all the repercussions of the climate crisis. Also, though, nomadism offers resilience in form of access to different seasonal resources, knowing which river to go to when the salmon are spawning, or which forest to be in when the chestnuts are falling or the berries are ripe or things like that. And also is going to offer different resilience in forms of structural support and community. And it's something we're going to talk about a little bit later on, but it's something that I think is very important to this as well. And important to remember as we go through this conversation that we're not talking as much about just individually one person who decides to up and become a nomad and move from place to place to place. What Guido and I are envisioning, me more in fiction and him in reality, are structural systems of nomadism, abilities of people to participate within a wider collective of nomads, and that gives them access to resources and support that can help people deal with the climate crisis. This is something that has been actually studied before, quite widely, in fact. There's been a number of climate thinkers and climate groups who have looked at nomadism as a part of potential climate responses. The Mediterranean Consortium for Nature and Culture describes nomadism as a perfect example of adapting to risk in the environment. The Regional Environmental Center for the Caucasus says that semi-mobile forms of pastoralism, in this case specifically looking at transhumanists, adopted to the logic of varying climate conditions. What all of these studies found at the end of the day is that nomadic societies are built to be adaptable. Right? That is something that is woven into their structures. And again, not just talking about individuals who can just pack up and leave, but the way that these actual social systems, these structures together, are made to be responsive to different changes in resources, different changes in conditions, different changes or in all sorts of things. And that's something that we really need to consider. Also worth considering in this conversation is how it impacts the environment itself. In the Solarpunk movement, we are not just concerned with how can we survive the climate crisis. We're, of course, concerned with how can we restore our relationship with nature. And there's a lot to be said for the role of nomadism in that as well. Nomadism is something which is a highly efficient form of lifestyle. It tends to be highly minimalist, very low on waste, and some forms have extra benefits as well. If we take a minute just to look at pastoralism or transhumance, which is one of the largest forms of nomadism as it exists in the world today. I think roughly estimates there are about 30 to 40 million pastoral nomads who are nomading about the world today. Studies of these groups have shown that a single flock of sheep can disperse about 5 million seeds a day over a 20-kilometer area, which is a lot just through the act of grazing and then cycling the seeds through their systems. This actually has been shown to have a major impact on landscape health and viability along the entire migration routes of these flocks. By spreading all these seeds, they are helping to increase the amount of pollinating flowers, among other things like that, as well as increasing chances for cross-pollination, biodiversity, things that ecosystems need to be resilient to changes in heat and climate and temperature and disease as well. So these tend to be very healthy environments. Also, grazing away the low growth fuel reduces the risk of wildfires and reduces or is a form of pest control that can be beneficial to nearby farms. This is something that is being put into practice in places in Europe already. I know there are parts of France and Spain that are using sheep and herds to try and cut back on some of the growth in forests to reduce the risk of wildfires. And the studies have been shown that's been fairly successful. It's also worth talking about the fact that nomadic communities passing through these areas offer a chance for economic exchange with settled communities. There's ability to interact with settled communities here in exchange of goods and services. When groups like pastoralists pass through, they bring high quality wool or meat or cheese or milk or things like that, which tend to be a much higher quality, much healthier, better nutrients than anything that people are going to be buying from some sort of corporation-based farming system. But there's also, of course, the ability for the nomads to engage in the agriculture and other goods of the settled communities themselves. And then you have your, if we step away from pastoralists for a minute, the second most common form of nomadism today is your tinker trader or peripatetic nomads, people who come into a region and offer a specific sort of skill, whether that be migrant laborers who are harvesting or people who are going to offer to fix or service various things, even fortune tellers, or if you read Becky Chambers' Monk and Robot series, the tea monk who offers his services as he goes around. This is another form of potential economic exchange that we see already in nomadic communities throughout the world, and which has a lot of room for growth and potential as we move forward. One of the things I like to think about when we're looking at this is the way that we could use these to build reciprocal networks of trust and community between settled communities and nomadic communities. We're going to come back to this again more at the end there. I just want to keep that in part of our conversation. All right. So, excuse me. On to what I am calling nomad punk. Obviously, I very clearly believe that there's a lot of potential in the Solarpunk movement to consider nomadism as a very, very specific a lens of focus, a field of focus. And I think that by kind of giving it its own separate designation, it helps us to do that. I first outlined this ideas in an essay I wrote in Hyphen Punk, Meandering Towards Nomad Punk and Genealogy. It said, Nomad Punk as a subgenre approaches the basic ethos of Solarpunk from a perspective that rejects the assumed dominance of sedentism in humanity's restoration of our place with nature, demanding freedom of mobility and equal access to mobility can be acts of radical utopianism. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this. The idea that, excuse me, the idea that part of how we consider our just futures and our equitable futures and our sustainable futures needs to include these ideas of human mobility in them as well. So what this lets us do is it allows us to really examine Solarpunk and step away from that attachment to our assumptions about the sedentary structures of human civilization, right? Because we tend to have this idea, we tend to have this almost theological mentality of humanity was started as hunter-gatherers, and then we developed agriculture and settled into small farming villages, then built cities, then went through industrialization. And we see it all as this very linear process. And I think Solarpunk tends to get caught up in that sometimes, as just looking where we go next in the story of human progress. But it's never been that simple. Even throughout those periods of human history, societies would often transition back and forth between different forms of subsistence, different forms of social structures. And so this is a way for us to try and dissociate our concept of the future from this very linear thinking of the past. So looking at nomadism in Solarpunk allows us to consider new forms of resilience, which is going to be very, very important. The more options we have in terms of resilience and adaptability, I think the better off we're all going to be in facing the climate crisis. Is going to also give us back paths towards restoring new paths towards restoring traditional knowledge. This is something I think is going to be very, very important to dealing with the climate crisis in a number of places throughout the world. Traditional ecological knowledge found in communities throughout the world has been integral to maintaining the health of ecosystems, to holding back the damages of storms and other impacts of the climate crisis. And a lot of this traditional knowledge came from nomadic or semi-nomadic or seasonally nomadic societies. When we turn away from nomadic knowledge, we're turning away from very often knowledge that can help us understand how to make a ecosystem itself more resilient to the climate change and things we can do to help restore, that sense of ecological stability. Nomadism also gives us a different lens for assessing questions of equity and justice. As part of our Solarpunk futures, we want to make sure that we are looking at futures that are just, equitable, tolerable for everybody involved. When we look at mobility as part of that, I think that changes who's part of these conversations, making sure that we're not leaving anybody out. Nomadic groups are sometimes overlooked in these conversations, and not just on the broad pastoral scale, but also people who don't have the sort of housing security that we associate with most urban dwellings. So in a variety of ways, this helps us expand those thought process to make sure that our Solarpunk futures are being inclusive of people with different forms of access to housing. And in that lens, nomadism actually gives us a different way to understand our cities themselves as well, which seems kind of ironic. I know cities kind of feel like these big stone and steel structures, these big monuments to sedentary values, but there's actually a lot of potential for nomadism to incorporate within cities as well. Whether it's nomads who are passing from city to city to city, and we have to question how are we going to plan for this movement of people through our cities, how are we going to accommodate them in housing and access to water and food and other resources, or also people who are just going to be nomads within the city itself. We talk about urban nomadism, urban foraging, all of these sorts of ideas. This is a very different way for us to understand our Solarpunk cities. And last, and perhaps even more or as important as any of the others, is a different way to experience and express joy. When we're talking about Solarpunk, we are looking at joyous futures. And this is one of the reasons I first wanted to make sure that nomadism was brought into Solarpunk itself and not just broader climate fiction. Often whenever I saw, whenever I saw nomadism mentioned in climate fiction, it was always as a post-apocalyptic, sort of experience. The system has collapsed. The structures have collapsed.
I
And
see.
people are nomadic as a result of that. What we're talking about here is something a bit different. It's not looking at a post-apocalyptic collapse. It's looking at people who are choosing this as a lifestyle, as a form of climate resilience, And this allows us to reconnect with nature in different ways, to harmonize with the world in different ways. And there is something very, very joyful about that. And this should be part of our joyous solar punk futures that we are telling, which I think is very important. So that's kind of my take on what nomad punk and what nomadism in solar punk is. Why is it nomad punk? Just like solar punk has that punk affixation title to it. Excuse me. Why nomad punk? If we go back to Adam Flynn's definition of infrastructure as a form of resistance, which is still one of my favorite quotes ever to describe solar punk, nomadism offers us a different perspective as well as to what sorts of resistance and what sorts of infrastructure we need to put into place. First, we got to talk about pathways of travel, formal ones versus informal ones. Who is allowed to move where and who makes those decisions? What are our official paths of travel? What are our informal paths of travel? A lot of transit in the world today is very regulated. There's a lot of effort to regulate transit, to regulate the movement of people and goods and services. And that is something which, while practical from a bureaucratic standpoint, is also limiting in a lot of senses. Excuse me. And I think a great example of this is looking at this situation of pastoralists today. When ecologists went to study the benefits of pastoralism, those same studies that I drew the seed dispersal data from, they were surprised to find how beneficial pastoralism was, because the conventional logic in the early 2000s was that pastoralism was really, really bad for the environment, that pastoral nomads were terrible for the environment. And the reason was because their routes of travel had been so restricted into such narrow lanes that when you try and push a whole, 1,000-head herd of sheep through a narrow corridor, they're going to deplete all the resources in there. And so what these studies found was it's not actually pastoralism that's bad for the environment. It's restricting their routes of transit. It's trying to make sure they can only travel through very limited corridors instead of spread out the way they need to. So this is going to change our question about who's allowed to be where, which is going to also very naturally come into questions of borders and property. The validity of borders is something which is going to be very much questioned in any sort of solar punk nomadic conversation. What is the validity of a border if it is going to restrict access to resources, if it's going to restrict the ability of people to move from place to place to get away from climate disasters? If we see mobility as part of our subsistence systems, if we see it as part of our survival systems, then our concept of borders has to be very, very greatly questioned. This includes things like right to roam, right to trespass, something I know for those of you who are following from Britain have a very, very admirable history of, and I've very much always enjoyed reading about the history of right to roam and right to trespass conventions in Britain. But these are things that are going to have to be broader conversations throughout the world. Access to housing as well. As I mentioned before, if we're going to have nomadic populations passing through our settled communities, consider what their housing situations are going to be. Will we need to offer temporary housing, way stations? Will mobile housing be part of this? It's a different way to think about our housing questions as well. Excuse me. And perhaps most important when talking about the punk part of nomad punk and the resistance form of it is the question of personal autonomy and bodily mobility as well. Famously, nomads can be very difficult to keep track of. Their freedom of movement makes it difficult to count, register, tax, and surveil them, which is why a lot of nation states don't like nomads very much. It's not easy to know where they are and how many of them are and how much taxes you can get out of them. And this is not by accident. Nomadic societies exist within their own networks of support. They're able to make use of lesser known passages to get around various means of state control, and they tend to be less attached to the concept of the state as well. This is something I foresee becoming more and more and more challenged as the climate crisis unfolds. And so one of the reasons that I wanted to try and incorporate nomadism specifically into Solarpunk is to present it as a way to challenge what we sometimes call green authoritarianism. And the basic idea is that as the climate crisis worsens, as things become more unstable, that instability is going to provide people with autocratic tendencies an excuse to try and centralize power and control resources. The world is chaotic. Trust me to fix it. I, your great and strong leader, can solve these things. Control of physical mobility, control of bodily autonomy will be a part of this. And so nomadism in our solarpunk fiction and in our solarpunk realities offers one way to help combat the rise of, or the risk of the rise of, authoritarian and autocratic practices that people will look to as a form of response to the climate crisis. And this is something which goes in multiple ways as well. Sedentary societies who support nomadic structures, this is also going to offer them a different form of resilience against the climate crisis and against green authoritarianism as well. So it's not something that just affects the nomads, it's something that also affects sedentary communities who support them. Key to all of this, central to all of this, is going to be the idea of building community. I've mentioned this a few times throughout this presentation, but this is never about just deciding to one person pack up, get in a van, and start traveling the world. The whole foundation of this is the idea that we need networks. We need systems of support, mutual aid, and whatnot. Community building is essential to our concept of solarpunk nomadism. We need to have structures of mutual support within nomadic communities themselves, things like way stations, shelters, safe houses, things like that. Access to resources, understanding where different resources are going to be throughout different times of year, both in terms of subsistence resources, as well as things for like basic hygiene and bodily care and other forms of things like that, and access to knowledge as well. Knowing how to get from point A to point B, knowing how to adapt to different systems, sharing the knowledge is very important. So structures within nomadic communities themselves will be very important, as well as relationships with sedentary communities. So both structures within and without. We need to talk about our laws and policies, which are currently criminalizing things like vagrancy, and talk about how to decriminalize these ideas, allow for transients, for mobility in a lot of our cities and states. We need to build up systems where we can exchange goods and services more equitably. Again, when nomadic communities pass through an area, they can often bring with them certain access to skills, to various products that may not be accessible otherwise. And systems of mutual support and aid, just in general, to combat against risks of the climate change and risks of autocratic tendencies as well. All right, so my focus mainly in this is as a fiction writer. When I come at this, I'm looking at this as how solarpunk imagines our futures, how we bring that into fiction, how we tell these stories, and I try to focus my storytelling as a writer around these sorts of questions. How can we in fiction build communities? How can we describe these? How can we show these? And how can we put those eventually into practice? All right, so thank you. I know I had to speed a bit through that because I'm trying not to just spend a whole bunch of time coughing at you. My focus was a fiction, and now I'm going to turn it over to Guido, and he is going to talk more about the practical sides of everything I just said.
That's brilliant, Chris. Thank you. Really, really inspiring. This is what we need to hear. Thank you so much. Guido.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the practical side of solarpunk nomadism. And we started this project about 2.5 years ago. And when I say we, it's myself and my son. Now he's 27 years old. And we both were affected by bad climate anxiety. And by the way, I've been an activist for all my life, and I'm also a conservation biologist. And
Guido, can I just check? Did you want to show some slides? If so, I'll make you a co-host.
Yes. Let me
Okay.
just. I don't have slides, but I shared the website.
Okay. I'll make you a co-host, and then you can share your screen from the website.
Yeah.
There we go, and we'll just carry on.
Let me see.
We got the long-term activists. I love your
Okay.
website. Inspiring.
Okay. Let me, because I'm from an iPad. Let's see if I'm doing it right. Condivide. Okay.
Yes, we can see that.
Can you see it? Okay, very good.
Yep.
Okay, I was saying that this project started between me and my son. My son is now 27 years old, and we started to think about Solarpunk nomadism a few years ago. We were doing some expedition in Europe documenting climate change and its possible solution. And then we started to imagine a zero carbon lifestyle for change maker, for nomadic or semi-nomadic change maker. And this is what we defined as Solarpunk nomadism. So we imagine in the future, and 1,000 of change maker choosing to live a nomadic or semi-nomadic lifestyle using zero carbon vehicle or vessel. That was the vision. And we've been lucky enough to present this vision on Twitter and to do it to the crypto community, let's say. So we started to do fundraising for this project on crypto project, specifically in a program called Gitcoin. And we have been successful to finance our project, and then we have been able to unfold it in the last 2.5 years. And let's say that at the beginning, we focus on the concept, the concept of Solarpunk nomadism and on our vision. And then we developed 2 key concepts. One is Solarpunk safe place. These are the places that in future, the community, the various community of Solarpunk nomad will use as a temporary base. And this will be built in a more climate change resilient area. And then we developed the concept of Solarpunk hubs, that these are local third places where the local community meet Solarpunk nomads, and together they practice, let's say, activities of regeneration, and then they explore what we call Solarpunk tech. And so that's at the beginning we focus on the vision, and this is about first 6 months of our project, and then we started to focus on vehicles, and we started to build it. And I must say that we are from a region of Italy that it's let's say we are doers by nature. So we started to imagine this beautiful world, and then the question was, okay, how we can build it? And we started to experiment with vehicles, and the first vehicle we assembled was an electric tuk-tuk, and we did that in southern India, and there's a camper tuk-tuk. So let me see if I can show you it here. So, okay, this is, and showing you some of this vehicle, you see also how we work. So we start from the imagination of an idea, and you can see the white image is a sketch of the idea. And then we did some workshop with local community to co-imagine the use of electric tuk-tuk for Solarpunk nomads. And then following this workshop and these ideas, we build it. And now you don't see the interior, but this is a camper tuk-tuk. So it's a small camper, you can sleep inside it, you can cook it, and then you can travel at zero carbon and being, let's say, nomadic. At the moment, the tuk-tuk is with a a local project that is doing sustainable tourism. And you can also, one of the important characteristics of our vehicles that are, we consider them public goods, so they can be used for free. So in case you will find yourself in Southern India, shoot me a DM and we will put in touch you with the people owning, let's say, handling now, managing this vehicle, and you can sleep on this vehicle for free or can use it for free.
Brilliant. Love it.
And that's our approach. And this is the second vehicles we build it. This is a European vehicle. And so it's an electric bike with a trailer. It's a camper trailer. So in this trailer, there is a tent, there is solar panel, and there is everything for you to travel, because bikes are one of the most, let's say, sustainable way of traveling. So you see, again, from the idea to the vehicle. And then this was summer of 2023. And then my son, we built this vehicle in Italy, and then my son took the bike and went to Bruxelles by bike. So trying to, he did, I think, 1,300 or 1,400 kilometers by bike by himself. And the idea was to imagine the life of future Solarpunk nomads. And when you put yourself in that situation, it's much easier for you to envision what is coming. And it was a great experience. At the moment, this bike is actually Dustin Jacobus, that is the artist who did these two art for Chris. He's a common friend, and at the moment is at his place. But in case you want to use our camper bike, again, it's a public good, get in touch with me. If you want to carry, I don't know, from Bruxelles to UK or to Bruxelles to Sweden, just get in touch, it's there for you. And this is the way we build. So imagine, we talk with people, and then we start with crazy ideas, and we really build it. And after that, we built other two vehicles. One is a foraging bike that we just finished this fall. And the idea is to use this bike on the Alps to do foraging mission. Again, it's an electric bike. And then we co-developed another project that is the Solarpunk bamboo bike with our friends our friend from Uganda called Pius Isabiria. And we co-imagined this, and we help him a little bit, financing part of the project. And then he built this bamboo bike and did an expedition from north to south of Uganda. And this is another way we, let's say, one of our approaches to try to build as open source as possible, involving local projects, local people, in order to share this vision and then to co-develop it. And then let's see, here you can see the route that we follow from Italy to Belgium, and then some images of the expedition and the arrival in Bruxelles. What else? For us, the workshop, the educational part, it's very important. So whenever we do activities locally, and we try to involve the local communities and children, but also adults. We conducted probably already about 20 workshops, sometimes in presence, like here. Here we are in Bangalore, in southern India. You can see these girls are they're playing with the Solarpunk art, and they are discussing, they are imagining a positive future for the area. And that's a key point of Solarpunk, that is helping people to stay positive, and specifically young people. And I've seen that with my son, that when he started to really to focus on Solarpunk nomadism and to live the dream and to really focus on how to build this, he started to be much more positive, and his climate anxiety was very much healed. And it's not easy, because we all suffer of climate anxiety, but this is a good way to heal it. And we think that solar panel nomads will play a very important role on that. As Chris was saying, nomads have a very important role in societies. And for us, solar panel nomads specifically will be the storyteller of this revolution. So traveling from community to community and bringing with their crazy vehicles, they will bring some breath of fresh air and some positive vision of the future, but also they will bring experience. They will tell stories on how other communities are coping with climate change, and they will be very important in building local climate change resilience. And here, let's see, yeah, you see here with our partner in India, this is Marco, my son, and this is an image done from one of the artists we collaborate with, and we try to support artists, real artists, even if we use heavily AI art generation. And here, for example, you see this part of the imagination. These are these little stories. These are little character of solar panel nomads have been developed by children and young people during some of the workshop, and then they started to imagine this. For example, they imagine that Bob is a nomadic doctor in southern India, and he can arrive with his tuk-tuk powered by solar panel and bringing his free medicine, free care to local communities. And then there are a lot of crazy ideas, but all about nomadic change maker. And for example, here you see the central image. We are very near the Alps. The Alps are a very important area, and we imagine also how Solarpunk nomadism will unfold in the Alpine region. And let's see if these are about the vehicles, and but we just started. Our project is very new. We started to work on that, and we are not working full time on that because we have other job as well. But we started 2.5 years ago. But there is so much to unfold, and specifically talking about vehicles, we can wait to make solar panel nomad van, and this is we're almost there. We missed the let's say the financial resources to do that, but it's almost possible to do a real Solarpunk nomad van. And so we're talking about an electric van, and they're pretty expensive, but they're already on the market and price is going down very fast. And then one key part of the Solarpunk nomad is that in our vision, they will recharge themselves. So imagine that you have your electric van, you live inside your van, you move from north to south of Europe with the season, like the animal zoo, and you try to connect a local community around all the roads, and then you charge your Solarpunk van with solar panel. And with unfoldable solar panel, now there are new technology coming very fast, like the printed solar panel, and it's quite possible. Or I think 2 years ago, in the summer, I followed an expedition they did in Australia with the Tesla, using they were carrying rolls of printable solar panel. It was a university expedition. And they crossed all the Australia, probably they circumnavigated, or they, anyway, it was a very long expedition, totally powered by the sun, using the solar panel that you open when you need, you recharge the car and you go. And this is very important, it's a key part of our idea, because if you can recharge your vehicle, or if you can travel, like for example, with the sailing boat that is already zero carbon, if you have an electric engine and solar panel, you will spend very little, and you don't need to have capacity of traveling 1,000 kilometers a day, because the solar panel normally moves slowly from community to community, but then you will have a very minimalistic lifestyle, and you will not need much money to do that. And this means that this will be a lifestyle affordable for a lot of people. And this can really change the game, because imagine to have thousands of change makers that can afford to do full-time their job or working with local community, helping them to have a sustainable lifestyle, to prepare for climate change. This can be, in our vision, a really game changer. What else? We did other expedition, just to mention another couple, very important. One was done by my son last year in Ladakh. So he moved from southern India to Ladakh using only public transport. We try to minimize flying as much as possible. I think my last flight was 7 years ago. And we try to travel as much as possible with public transport. And in Ladakh, we are developing some activities about climate adaptation. So our project is more international than Italian. And another expedition we did a few months ago was early November. We went to Ukraine to bring some, let's say, some aid in the form of solar panel, batteries, and tire for the bikes. And we are in touch with Gen Ukraine. There is a network of eco-village in Ukraine, and we try to assist them as much as possible. And they are pretty Solarpunk, actually, because they are very creative. They do a lot of very interesting things, so we can wait to do more with them. Other few things I want to mention is that we started to, let me see if I forgot something to show you. You see possible vehicles. Some are real, some are just imagination. The tribes will come. And if you check out our website, there is a very important part on Solarpunk world building, so on co-imagining a Solarpunk world. And as I said, I use a lot AI art, also to help people to imagine this future. And if you go to the website, there is also part of the Nomad Fund. This is one of our activities. We have a little fund for Solarpunk nomads in need. And we used recently to support the Ukraine groups, and also to support a little project in an eco-village in southern Sweden. So they needed some tech for their, I think it was an inverter or something like that for their solar power system. And you can apply to the Nomad Fund as well. And this is very important, building public. Our project is a public good project. And you can click this link and you can see our finances. You can see how much we raise and how we're using our funds. And we try to update that every few months. Let's give you an overview of what we are doing. I want to mention other 3 projects, and one is called Solarpunk Hub. Let me see if I can show you.
This is brilliant, Guido, and maybe post the link as well. Say what you got to say, and then we'll probably go to some comments, feedback, or questions from people. But
okay.
Carrie, that's absolutely inspiring. I love you thought so much about so many aspects of it. It's brilliant, you know.
That's good. So let me just mention the last few things and a couple of minutes. So we are building a Solarpunk hub here in Italy. So we rented some land, it's 1.5 hectares, where to experiment the regeneration and Solarpunk tech. And there we try to do things in a different way. For example, you can see a lot of these on our Twitter account, Solarpunk Nomads. And for example, we try to coexist with wildlife. We're finding ways to co-thrive with wild boar. That is not easy, but we are doing things in a different way. And for us, we are also a good way to test the concept of Solarpunk Hub, how to bring local community together, to thrive together, to cultivate, to imagine the future, and to use the tech that will be the basis of the Solarpunk revolution. And then on our website, there is also a little tool called Climate Tracker that will help you to self-evaluate your climate change resilience. And you just input your lifestyle. It can be anonymous or not, you choose, and then it gives you an evaluation. It's like a self-assessment to see how much climate resilient you are. And you can choose as a nomad or not a nomad. And the last thing is that I want to mention is we are developing the concept of Solarpunk Camp. We tested it last year on the Alps, where we met 6 people from different countries of the world. Actually, Chris was with us. And in a Solarpunk camp, you spend some time with fellow Solarpunks or people who really want to learn more about Solarpunk. And with a specific mission, that camp on the Alps, the mission was to co-imagine the Solarpunk future of the Alps. But then you spend time together, you use solar panel, you cook things that you collect in the woods, and you do a lot of very interesting things. And specifically, you share time together. That is so important.
Brilliant. Really inspiring, Guido. Thank you. You're working on so many levels, from common ownership to what I love about what Guido's just said. Well, while people are thinking about comments, feedbacks, and questions, if you do, there's a little React tab. If you stop sharing your screen, Guido, there's a React thing down the bottom, and you can raise a hand, and we can see who's kind of 1, 2, 3, 4. Really, really inspiring by both of you there, Chris and Guido. We, as the movement of movements, environmental, community, social, and solutions, really, really need to up the scale of the imagination and the practical working examples. What I loved about what you guys are both talking about, and also, you know, Guido was saying, these are real things that we're doing now. And I think Coco in the chat was saying about, you know, the project they've got that's going to West Africa and taking solar panels to communities there and things. You know, there's a number of groups of people we could link up on this that have been doing this, some aspects of this around the festivals and traveling and various things, and really, really inspiring. And what you're bringing up there, Chris, about, you know, it's not just sedentary, but there are nomadic solutions to the climate, and how can we work together, nomadic and more settled communities, shall we say. So, folks, really, really inspiring. I know Daniel Gardogni, those beamed in towards the end, has been talking all of this stuff with us and Solution Zone TV for years, particularly about nomads going around and trading as we went and taking the solar and all the rest. So, guys, if you've got a question or a comment, doesn't have to be a question, or a feedback or anything, there's a React tab down the bottom. Is that Zoom user, or is that Habiba's got a normal hand up? Is Fluffy still with us? It'd be great to hear from Fluffy. I know he's been working on a few of these. Zoom user, Habiba? And anyone else stick a hand up? Or you have to unmute, Habiba. You have to unmute, Habiba. You can't. Okay, Habiba, we can't hear you. Okay, Charlie's got his hand up next. Sorry, Habiba, we'll jump over to Charlie when you sort your sound out. Charlie, I love your picture of your boat. That's brilliant, mate.
I mean, I used to draw pictures of solar-powered living vehicles when I was a kid, and I just wanted to offer any kind of help I can to anyone who we've been doing this for years, and you know, we build batteries, solar panels. I know about, I mean, you know, science, tech stuff, but also, you know, future living and economic, anything really to do with this whole area. I'd love to get involved and help any way I can. And yeah, I have a little bit of hands-on experience with this stuff. Yeah, just loving this whole conversation, really enjoying it. That's all.
When I saw it posted up on the WhatsApp group, I was like, Charlie, we've got to go. I thought she had a clash with another meeting, but yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much. Yeah.
It's them and Charlie. Well, also maybe Charlie should tell them a little. You make these bike sound systems, don't you?
Well, I do.
Solar-powered bike sounds of the future.
battery sound systems and big ones, small ones. But yeah, I mean, building building big batteries, small ones, putting together this sort of this DIY open source kind of tech approach is what I've been doing for years now. So yeah, it works. You can do it. You don't have to wait. Just need to reframe things legally so that it's a bit easier. But yeah, it's the future. So
amazing. Let's get in touch. And unfortunately, I don't use WhatsApp, but shoot me a DM on Twitter, and
I'll find you.
Let's have a chat. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Daniel, did you want to? You caught the second half, I think, but you've been talking about kind of Solarpunk, nomadic trade convoys for quite a while. Me and Daniel worked on something called Solution Zone TV for many years, and what we see at the festivals really is kind of Solarpunk nomadism. Danny, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah. Tell them about the trade convoys you were talking about, kind of people moving around trading. Mycelium networks.
Yeah, well, that was I was trying to model some kind of a transitional parallel structure, which is already kind of there in eco villages and transition towns and whatnot. But how to turn this into a living, decentralized superorganism with trading somehow. So like start getting everything moving, the resources, the talents, the energy, the technology that people are inventing in some of these places. So that was the main idea. And then, yeah, the doctor was a good idea, what Guido was saying. I forgot about that bit, that you need healers as well, nomadic healers. And also, I think veterans should be retrained to be the natural guard, escorting these convoys of traders, and that should be enough as a parallel system of some sort, just to avoid the sudden collapse of this mainstream system. But Solarpunk is luckily a post-collapse positive vision. So if you think post-collapse, then you get closer to the true Solarpunk meaning.
Nice, Danny. I mean, it is. I've just posted a link there for Gen Europe. So there's a whole network of eco villages that these Solarpunk nomads could move between.
Yeah, the GAN is big and it's really strong, but it needs to be synchronized somehow because there's big differences between places within the network. So same in the transition towns.
Yeah, we need to network the solutions. Coco, if you can hear us, do you want to tell the group about what you've been doing with Brufut and the kind of the journeys to West Africa to support a school out there and the solar stuff you're doing? Can you hear us, Coco? I met Coco originally through Amazon Beat when they came to the Hive in Dalston. You need to unmute if you do want to speak, Coco. Can you hear us? Hello, Coco. Okay. Not at the moment, but just to give it the basic, they're a sound system crew who've been, for a number of years now, been raising funds to basically buy sewing machines and solar panels, drive down West Africa and spend a month fitting them out in a school, basically. And this is the kind of thing that we need to do. What do they call it? Solidarity, not charity. Direct links with communities and helping. All right, folks. So again, stick your hand up if you've got any other. It doesn't have to be a question. It can be a feedback. It can be a anything you thought about tonight. Anything you've been thinking about. What we think. Dottie, go for it.
Yeah, I just was going of a couple of links to some books I got here, probably back to front, but there's this one, Ancient Past, let's put the title of that, Graham Robb, traveling around Europe on a bicycle to rediscover the pathways that the ancient Celts used to take. Another one is this book I've got called Rekindling Community by Alistair McIntosh. He is raised in the Isle of Lewis, visiting professor of human ecology at the Department of Geography, Sociology, University of Strathclyde. He's doing a book about kind of like reinvigorating the idea of community and resilience, which I thought was quite good. Might be relevant to people to have a read. And then good old favourite of mine, which we're doing a reading group of, we've been reading this book for quite a long time. Dawn of Everything, David Graeber and Wengrove. Essential reading if you want to look at alternative systems of community and how different models of community have worked in the past, including sort of hybrids of how to have sedentary and nomadic communities living together, and how there have been plenty of examples in our history of people moving between nomadic, pastoral, and sedentary, town or city-based lifestyles. And I think that's very good to get some inspiration.
That's very important. I think it was. Thank you, Doyle. That's really good. Just it's really good what Chris was actually saying. This is a subject that doesn't get covered enough. There's friction between nomad and settled people, but there is also a massive amount of cooperation over thousands of years. And how do we work on that to help and support these different ways of doing things? There's a few that in a minute, maybe in a bit, Gareth might want to mention about some of the stuff we're doing with the Solarpunk group. We've got a WhatsApp link. I'll put that in the chat shortly, and we're working towards a Solarpunk event. Physical event. We're meeting up maybe hopefully around is it March 28th or 29th. Before that, we're going to do some Solarpunk hacks and getting together both on Zoom and physical, working together to put together these kind of visions of a slightly better future. Just to throw a few bits in there, maybe Gareth wants to say something. And I'd like to check with Bright Flame as well. She said she knew Starhawk. So just say a little bit more. I started doing Rainbow Environmental Community Centres because I read a book by Starhawk called Magic, Sex and Politics, and it had stuff about coordinators and talking circles and an old native tradition where you pass the stick round and get a chance to talk. There's a very famous book by Starhawk called The Fifth Sacred Thing, and it's set off in the future. And there's basically two different versions of the future. LA is an extreme police state. It's after a bit of a collapse of the system and the environment and the main, whatever you want to call it, system. And LA has become a police state where they sell water and the prices are very high and everything, and it's very, very controlled. Whereas San Francisco, 3 grandmothers went out and started digging up the streets, had a Reclaim the Streets party, and they started growing food everywhere, and they started having people's assemblies, and they basically created this, alternative future of the kind of worlds we want to see run on renewables. And they have these big community assemblies. And one of the interesting bits I liked about it was that when they have these big community assemblies, like we had with Occupy Movement, and Eris mentioned someone I'll bring up in a sec, was they would have someone with a mask on who would speak for the trees or for the animals or for the water or for the air and say, hold on a minute, humans, if you're going to do this, this will affect the trees and the birds and the air. So speaking for the non-human worlds, I thought was a brilliant thing to put in. And Starhawk is really such a teacher. She's a long-term activist from the anti-nuclear, and really imagining these futures is so important, and how do we create them? Eris mentioned something in the chat. I think she does comics and stuff, but she said there's a comic about a future world where the Arab Spring was successful and where these dictators and these wars didn't take over, and they've moved into a better future where they are using people's assemblies. Like, I've been trying to remind the main parts of, I've been involved with all the 7 waves of the environmental movement, in many ways you could call it, in the last 30 years, and I'm trying to really push the solutions and using imagination for better futures. And I remind some of the more recent movements that what Danny reminds me, on the first day of Occupy, we had 900 cities having direct democracy assemblies, and at its peak, Danny told me recently, it was 2,000 cities, you know, having direct democracy assemblies. These are better futures. We should be able to keep making them and travel between them, shall we say. All right, Bright Flame, I hope I'm inspired to say something. We'll keep running till about 8:30 because it's a really inspiring one tonight, folks. If you've got to go, you've got to go. But and we'll stay around for a bit of a chat afterwards. Bright Flame, tell us a bit more about our friend Starhawk. Over.
Well, I was going to say before you mentioned Starhawk again, that I'm thrilled to have fiction and actual projects working together in this collaboration, because I was just part of a conversation that Susan K. Quinn, who's a Solarpunk writer, convened. She's got the Bright Green Futures podcast and website, which has a lot of resources on it. And those of us who are in the first anthology that's forthcoming have been talking about there seems to be too much of a separation, like solar punks who are out in the streets doing the work, creating projects, often say, you know, writers, that's, you know, you all are just wishful thinking, you know. And then too many writers aren't bringing in you know, actual solar punk work and actual trajectories for us getting to those futures. So you know, it's wonderful to have this joint convening, and I'm gonna like send that group the link to this recording also. But thank you.
Brilliant, brilliant. So I'm going to post in a minute the WhatsApp chat. There is a Solarpunk, so under Climate Emergency Centre Solarpunk events group that we're forming to physically meet and meet internationally on Zoom. So I'll post that in the chat in a minute. Any further feedback? Anyone wants to come back, or anything that's been said? Christopher or Guido want to come back on or mention or say?
Yeah, I just, you know, I was listening, and you know, it's nice to hear. I guess, you know, the cynical part of my brain just goes, there's just so many hurdles to this. Where does one start to dismantle the hurdles? I mean, the UK, for example, you know, as you know, anyone who's been living here knows, or has been involved in any kind of alternative lifestyle stuff, you know, it would be illegal in this country to be a nomad punk. You know, you could not do it in this country. It is fundamentally against the law, and so that was my negative thought. My positive thought was, you know, imagine if all the trailer parks in America actually, if they actually, you know, picked up their trailers with, you know, some you know, some mirror image universe where Elon Musk wasn't a crazy fascist narcissist. You know, that somebody gave all those trailer livers, you know, a solar powered engine to pull their trailers out of the parks and set off again. Because of course there was this whole imagineering of the American country, you know, not the one that they consulted the native people about, but certainly, you know, the idea of the wagon and the going out west and traveling and being part of a, you know, a traveling community and exploring and adventuring and trading between towns, and that whole thing was very you know, part of the American dream, and something that the, you know, the American subconscious was built on, you know, and like, is there a way of reinvigorating that idea, and with the, you know, participation of people from you know, native communities who would like to bring back that way of life? I guess that's kind of the question.
Just to say, it's a very good point, Dottie. I mean, people still do travel in this country, but in the 90s, the government brought in a law: more than 6 vehicles is an illegal encampment, and they enforced it to varying degrees in varying locations. And the most recent law, about a year or two ago, was any more than 2 traveller vehicles is an illegal encampment. And they're not fully enforcing it, but it has had a chilling effect on the traveling community, shall we say. And, you know, these laws should be repealed. Travelers and nomads are some of the people who raise up awareness about the loss of civil liberties, shall we say, in our societies, particularly this time where we're, you know, raising awareness of what happened, you know, World War II times. It was the travelers and the nomads that were also put inside various camps and you know, and controlled and killed because of having a different view and a different way of doing things. And they've made it a lot more difficult in this country, but there is still a vast amount of people who are solar, nomadic, punk, festival, hippie, traveler, raver people who come out for some of the 700 festivals that happen every year in this country, that were born and birthed and created by a nomadic traveling people and people who were settled, who came out in their vans. And that still is a massive culture in this country and a massive resource and network and connection. And all of these people who build and make festivals are on the cutting edge of what you would call solarpunk nomadism. There's you know, from Dale Vince, who built the first windmill in Glastonbury Festival in '95 and started charging phones, and now he's a multi-millionaire running Ecotricity, the 5th biggest electric company in the UK. You know, there is a massive undercurrent, shall we say, of this alternative culture that has also gone mainstream. You know, solar panels, windmills are now a lot more mainstream than they were in 1995. Art Groupie, I think you've got the last way in, unless anyone wants to stick a hand up quickly, and then we'll go to summaries from Guido and Chris and Lars. Really inspiring conversations tonight. Anybody else wants to say anything quickly? We will stay around for 10-15 minutes, keep the Zoom open for people to chat afterwards. And next week we've got Dr. Gail Bradbrook coming to talk about strategies for the future. And just to mention, there's a big chat about collapse awareness in our movements recently, and Gail wants to talk about that. I also want to raise the point that unless we use our imagination to create better futures, we are all just reinforcing the doom ethic and, you know, all these films pumped out by Hollywood about doom and disaster, when actually, to me, it's a lack of imagination, it's a lack of resources, money, funding and spaces being given to these kind of groups to be able to imagine and create the sustainable futures and the solutions that we know are possible. Art Groupie, over.
Yes, and Felix, I never even went to a festival before 2019 in my life. Like, this is a totally new bunch of people with whom I was not familiar before lately. And I'm trying to think of I can understand that they've been doing this for many years, and I love it. But what I'm trying to understand is there's due to be a rise in fascism globally, etc., and a divergence of politics hugely. How do we engage people that have not been involved in this before? How do we engage disenfranchised and very poor people in loads of different parts of the country? Because the first festival I went to was Glastonbury 2019, and I was actually a little bit disappointed because I went there and of course I loved it. It was amazing, and I never even went to a festival before of any kind. And but I looked around and I thought, these people have been doing it for 20 years and they've been in this field like every year, but they can't change it. They can't go back out and change anything, really. And it's all, how do we reach out to other people? That's my problem that I'm trying to think of.
Yes, the eternal question of, you know, getting out beyond preaching to the converted. I've always found that, you know, music brings people together, events, physical spaces, gatherings of all sorts. You know, festivals do reach out across the board to all sorts of people, all walks of life, but they also, only the people who nowadays can afford to pay to get into a festival, whereas they used to be
free festivals.
Bring back free festivals. Helen, quick one, and we're gonna wrap up soon. Really inspired tonight. Keep the imagination going.
Quick answer to Art Groupie. The link I've put in about Dream of a Low Carbon Future, the guy used to run workshops and then people took them into schools and got the kids drawing the pictures. And the other one is we have got someone who's also done a electric powered bike, and sometimes if there's some big thing on, the council lets him go on the main shopping street, and we've even had Leeds Philharmonic Choir singing to music coming from him. So get the bicycles built.
Absolutely. On that note,
on your bike, mate.
On your bike, rinky dink, solar powered and bike powered sound system from the 90s Charlie's waving his hands. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've rolled on for an hour and a half, 90 minutes of fun-filled, really inspiring tonight. I'm going to just burble for a quick minute and hand that over to Chris and then Guido for the last words. Just to say, you know, next week we've got Dr. Gail Bradbrook, one of the founders of XR. She's talking about strategies and collapse awareness and collapse aware communities. But I think we need to add on to that word, collapse aware, but rebirth or rebuild or regenerate or renew aware communities, because we need imagination, we need resilience, we need the physical spaces to build these better futures. And to me, you know, if we don't, I think somebody's put something in there about what Starhawk said, but it's basically like that we need to be able to imagine the future we want to see before we build it. And if we're only imagining doom and collapse and destruction and only making Hollywood films about collapse and destruction, where are the films about solarpunk futures? Where are the films about cooperation beyond borders, about decentralized people's community assemblies linked up digitally, sharing information and ideas, stepping down, using less energy, bikes to you know, renewable energy, to whatever it is we can, to living floating lives for better futures, to cleaning up the environment. The future is repairing and regenerating our earth, and to do that we need the imagination. I'm going to give one last one to Mary Ellen, who is a legendary activist from Disabled Peoples Against Cuts and always has Buddha-like wisdom to share with the group. So Mary Ellen, you've got the last one, then we're going over to Chris and Guido to final comment and say goodbye. Thank you for coming, Goddess. What would you like to share with the group? Over.
Hi there, Vinny. Sorry, I've not been participating, but I've been outside the Royal Courts of Justice today with the 16 for 16, defend our juries and defend the right to protest, etc. And tomorrow is a really crucial day. So if anyone's free at all, please come and join us tomorrow. I'm going to be there again. And it'd be so lovely to see you all if you can make it. But thank you so much. I've just been listening in today and it's been fascinating and just fills my heart with hope. And thank you for that. Thank you.
Bless. We've achieved. That's what we wanted, hope. Chris, thank you so much for coming, Chris Muscato, and then over to Guido. Final parting comments, anything you want to say or share with the group, and we'll stop the recording. People are welcome to stay around to chat for everyone. Chris, over.
I just wanted to thank you very much for the chance to talk to everyone, and thanks for dealing with my coughing throughout it. But yeah, absolutely. I think this is, I'm loving listening to everything you are talking about. You're already, I've got like 5, 6 new story ideas in my head just from listening to all of you talking. So, but I love, before we mention how important it is for creatives and other activists to be working together. We do tend to kind of segregate ourselves sometimes. And I think that the more we can overlap our work and overlap our in the street activism and our arts that we're putting together, we're talking about how to get the message out there. I mean, the more options we have, the better a chance we have of getting it out there. So thank you all again very much for the chance to talk to you today.
Bless. Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming. Guido.
Yeah, thank you so much. Very interesting evening, very interesting conversation. Beautiful people. I hope to join other times, in some other of your meetings. And I just want to share an invite to reach me out and to join us on the field, join us in one of our expeditions. I'm looking for someone to do about a couple of weeks trekking on the Alps. We tried last year, but too much snow, so we'll try again this year with a camp and a long trek. And we are going to Ukraine again, probably in May. If you want to join us, just reach me on Twitter is the best way. Just send me a DM and let's chat. We are building a community of Solarpunk nomads, of dreamers and doers. So reach out, please, and thank you.
I will say, as someone who has gone on one of Guido's expeditions before, it's absolutely very much worth every minute of the time. It's the community building, the networking alone is fantastic. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming, Guido and Chris, and I'll stop the recording there, but wherever you are, use your imagination, find space and start working on the solutions and the practical working solutions for a better future. See you next week, same time, same place, same Zoom link. Like, subscribe, share. Nice one.